Well, hello, Chuck Colson. How are you? Thanks for giving me some of your time.
John Lofton, I'm thrilled to be with you. It brings back memories of the old days when you and I were colleagues in what was then considered a noble cause, and for many people still is.
Chuck is alluding to the fact that I believe we both knew each other when we were both not Christians, and that was in the early 1970s.
Yep.
We were at opposite ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. I worked at the Republican National Committee as the editor of the party's national publication, and Chuck worked down there in the White House.
In the Nixon White House, in the office next to the president, and fell from there, went to prison, and converted to Christ, and then I discovered that my old pal and colleague, John Lofton, had done the same thing. So now we're back in a far more noble cause than we were then.
So we know that God can save at least two people, huh?
Well, the Boston Globe, when I was converted, John, you may know this or may remember this, the Boston Globe said, if Chuck Colson can be converted, there's hope for anybody.
They, of course, meant that as a compliment, huh?
I guess.
I don't. In any event, when I was at the Republican National Committee, my respective bosses there were George H.W. Bush and Bob Dole. And, of course, my immediate boss was Lynn Nofziger,
who was an old friend as well.
Absolutely. And, of course, one of our main jobs there was to lose all the interoffice mail that came from you and all the things you had in mind. We poked it with a stick. Whenever you sent some ideas up, we thought we heard it ticking and had to soak it in water. And
I remember.
And I wanted to I sought an interview with you for a couple of reasons. To say hi, to reminisce a little bit like we just did. I believe the last time I saw you was in the 80s when I went out to Jessup Prison with you and a whole bunch of other folks.
I remember that.
Yeah, you preached out there.
Yep.
And, of course, I also saw you when you used to have those wonderful meetings at your offices, the Prison Fellowship offices or headquarters there. Where, in Reston?
That was Reston. We're now out in Lansdowne. We moved to a
Yeah. Boy, I had some good speakers there, and I must say some good food that I miss.
Good.
And now I want to talk to you about, I believe it's a new project. And who would have thought that in the year of our Lord, 2009, you have to actually set up a website to tell Christians that they ought to have a Christian worldview. But in any event, you've done it. It's called the Chuck Colson Center for Christian Worldview. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about it and what the reaction has been to it.
Well, people can visit it. It's colsoncenter.org. And we've been getting thousands of hits. I think we got 25 or 30,000 the first week it was up. We don't have anywhere near everything in place. We've got about 5,000 items of research available and some daily exercises people can do, but we're planning to load it with curriculum. That'll start probably by the end of the year, and we'll have 8, 10, 15 courses that people can take at different subjects of how Christianity interacts with life, how you live out the Christian faith in the context of the world we live in, and how Christianity affects home life, the neighborhood, art, science, music, literature, politics, everything, because everything is under the lordship of Christ. If you're a Christian believer, as you point out, you ought to realize that Christianity is a worldview, because that's what the word logos means. We see that in the Gospel according to John. What John, as a Greek, was talking about was logos, which we translate to mean word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. But it's a far richer term than that. It means all truth that could ever be known. The Hebrews used to translate it the mind of God. So if that's Jesus, then everything is under his purview. So we're teaching people how to think Christianly about all of life. That's basically what it is, and we're getting a great response.
Well, what you just said is reiterated on your site, because you do ask the question on your site, what then is a Christian worldview? And you say,
right.
you say in part, living every area of our lives in obedience to and for the honor of Jesus Christ, our Lord, that a Christian worldview is to know and serve him in every area of our lives. That's one would think, more or less Christianity 101. And I'd be interested to know why you think so many people who call themselves Christians do not have a Christian worldview. And I say that because for a lot of my life, I was a secular conservative. I was an unbelieving conservative. I was a non-Christian conservative. Then when I became a Christian, it dawned on me that almost all the people I ran around with, the leaders in the so-called conservative movement, claimed to be some kind of Christian, but their plans, Chuck, never had anything to do with Christ or the Bible or God. They seem not to have a Christian thought in their head. Why do you think that was so?
Well, there's a long history behind it, John, but largely the fundamentalist movement of the 20th century was a retreat from culture. And the fundamentalists believed that they were losing to higher criticism of the Bible. They were losing the intellectual strongholds of universities. And so they retreated and figured they'd build their own institutions, a parallel structure in society. But in 1947, a great theologian by the name of Carl Henry wrote a book, The Uneasy Conscience of a Modern Fundamentalist. And he said, we've made a mistake in the 20th century. We disengaged from culture. We've got to re-engage. So all of a sudden, everything became, how do we get back into the mainstream of culture? And instead of going into culture, we went into politics, and we married politics, married a political agenda. And that missed the culture. Culture is nothing but religion incarnate. But most Christians are used to this separatist model, this idea that we just think about Christianity in the abstract. They think about it as a relationship with Jesus. They tend to reduce it. Reductionism is part of the curse in American life. We take a big, big concept like the Logos, and we reduce it down to, it's Jesus and me. That's all I need. And so we go to church, we listen to therapeutic sermons, never hear messages that are challenging us to live out our faith and to engage the culture in a winsome way. And we did a study on this. There was a foundation that wanted to give me some money in the mid-'90s if I would start a think tank on Christian worldview, because I have been greatly influenced by Abraham Kuyper. Abraham Kuyper was a Dutch theologian who became Prime Minister of Holland, turn of the 19th into the 20th century. When he dedicated Free University in Amsterdam, he said, there's not one square inch in the whole domain of human existence as to which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry out, mine. And I loved Kuyper's writings. And so this group wanted to start a think tank. I said, well, I don't think it'll do any good because I don't think evangelicals, conservative Christians, have any idea what worldview is. So we did a survey. George Barna did a survey. Only 4% of the people wanted more information about about biblical worldview. So I decided to write a book first, which I wrote with Nancy Christie, a book entitled How Now Should We Live, which 10 years ago was published and has been in print, taught in campuses around the country. Worldview has now become a very well understood term, at least. It's still hard getting people who go to church because they want to be made to feel good to do what they ought to do. See it as a worldview.
Hot tub religion. Remember, Packer called that hot tub religion.
Yep, that's exactly what it is.
Well, it is, and I wonder if you would agree with me that the religious right, so-called, the Christian conservatives' involvement in politics, it's pretty much been a failure, I would say, because I believe a lot of them, maybe most of them, the Christian leaders and Christian organizations supposedly came to Washington. They came to the top, and they basically de facto, whether they intended it or not, just became another special interest group.
Well, you and I are singing from the same hymn book. That doesn't surprise me. I wrote about that in the mid-'80s. I said the moral majority was a mistake because it's aiming at the wrong target. We're thinking that we can change the country by changing politics. Politics is nothing but an expression of culture. And until you change culture, you'll never change politics. And I argue that now, and people are beginning to nod their heads. Now, I won't say the Christian right was a complete failure, because I can't say that, because I look at a couple of judges on the Supreme Court. I look at some of the human rights things that George Bush did. I look at the defense of life by Bush, particularly. And I say we did do some good things. There were some good things that were accomplished. But they're all holding actions. They're not the ultimate solution. The ultimate solution is transforming culture, which is what a church is supposed to do. The word cult itself means belief system, and that's what a culture comes from. That's where the word comes from. So until we can reform the belief system, which starts with the church, politics is always going to be like putting out a fire after it's burned everything up.
That's true. Well, of course, it was Henry Van Til in his book, The Calvinistic Concept of Culture, who said that culture was religion externalized. In other words, if you wanted to see the religion of any culture, anywhere in the world, fly around the world, drop you at night, go look at their religion. Who are their gods? And that tells you.